G'day, I'm the Thorough Tank, and this is a reference guide for tanks for the Cathedral of Eternal Night dungeon on Mythic Keystone difficulty. This video was recorded after the release of patch 7.3, which increased the difficulty of Mythic Plus. We're doing a 15 here, which is about equivalent to the old 18-19. This is an unforgiving dungeon. The mechanics here will wipe you if they're done incorrectly, but if you do them right, it's not actually that hard. For this first pull, grab these first 5 mobs all together. They aren't too threatening and it's not really too difficult to deal with the double pull. First ability to watch out for is the Shadow Wall. It's a channeled AoE buff cast by the Fel Guards, which reduces enemy damage taken by 75% in an area around it. Just interrupt it. Second ability is Demonic Mending, cast by the Soul Eridar caster. It's a simple heal, just interrupt it as your top priority. Third ability is Fel Strike, which is cast by the Wrath Guards. It's targeted on ranged and healers. It won't hurt you much, but it's good to dodge it anyway. A word of warning for this hallway. There is a mini-boss behind you. It automatically aggroes when you step on this spot. You can usually pull the patrol of 3 without getting him, but you probably can't make it all the way to the lone Fellhound further back. If it's not bolstering, you can pull all of this together, no problem, but if in this video it is bolstering, our DK here actually takes it upon himself to go and try and grab the lone Fellhound. He steps on the spot and pulls the mini-boss, which actually causes a wipe after we end up bolstering it. So let's try that again. This pull, the Eridar has 2 abilities you want to look out for and deal with. The first is Devastating Swipe, which is a frontal magical damage cleave. You can move out of it or you can stun him to stop it. The other, he will drop a Fel Bubble, which will increase the haste of anything inside it, including the enemies. It's not too much of a big deal just to tank everything inside it. If you want to get fancy, you can try and position it so that your group can stand inside the bubble and the enemies are outside, but that's not really necessary. Key to fighting this mini-boss is keeping your group close to him. The shadow wave gets wider as it travels further away, so it's easier to dodge when you're close than when you're far away. It will one-shot on higher keys. If it's fortified, use Bloodlust on him as he has a ton of health, and Bloodlust will be up for the next boss anyway. As you're coming along this hallway, stay to the right as much as possible. If you're too far to the left, you can aggro the bats that are flying in the atrium. As you're gathering up mobs here, be careful of the bat flying overhead down the hallway. This is called the Dread Hunter. It has 2 main abilities. It has a Fear, which needs to be interrupted, and a frontal knockback, which is a cone called Shadow Swipe, does shadow damage and knocks you backwards. The smaller bats, if you happen to get one and need to fight it, have the Shadow Swipe ability, but they don't have the Fear. The rest of this hallway doesn't have anything new in it that you haven't seen. There's just a few different combinations of abilities, so make sure you deal with the Demonic Mending heal, deal with the Fel Strike, and try to tank the mobs near the green bubbles wherever possible. If it's not bolstering, you'll want to pull these next 2 packs together. I have to pull them separately here because it is bolstering in the video, but the 2 of them together are not too difficult to deal with if you have a couple of AoE stuns, and if your group has their DPS cooldowns ready to go, you're more than fine dealing with both packs together. Coming up the stairs here, you have your next new mob to worry about. It's a Succubus, which has a mind control cast called Alluring Aroma. You just need to interrupt it as quickly as possible so that no one gets mind controlled. The other 2 mobs in the pack are one of the demons with the haste bubble and the cleave, and a Fel Striking demon. Up here is the first trash skip. Just hug the middle right through here. The tree that you can see on the right here patrols left to right. If it's in a bad position, just wait a bit for it to move out of the way. As with most trash skips, it's a good idea to turn around and just watch your group as they come through in case one of them accidentally grabs it. This Succubus here patrols around the middle of the room. If it's nearby this pack, just grab it together. A couple of things to watch out for in this pack apart from the Succubus mind control. The Botanist caster will try 2 casts that both need to be interrupted. One is called Blistering Rain, the other one is a heal and it's called Fel Rejuvenation. You do need to clear this entire room of trash as it will aggro during the boss fight. These Fulminating Lashes are a nice preview of the ones in the boss fight. They'll fixate on a random person, which if you aggro them first will likely be you in both cases, and they'll explode if they reach them. Main ability to watch out for with this tree is its Lumbering Crash. Just make sure your group has a stun ready to go for each time it tries to cast this. It does a chunk of damage to the whole group. For this boss, have a cooldown ready for his Timber Smash. Kite any Fulminating Lashes that fixate you until the DPS can kill them. The Succulent Lasher ad that will spawn alongside the Fulminating Lashes hits quite hard and does need to be killed as soon as possible. If you need to move the boss out of the green patches that it drops, please do so. And tank him in this spot here. It makes it easier for melee DPS to kill the lashes that are fixating on ranged DPS and healers, as they'll walk through the boss on their way and it'll be easy enough just to cleave them down. Up ahead here is another trash skip with 2 patrols to look out for this time. There's one on the left and there's another patrol around to the right. You just need to make sure that both of them have left a gap that's wide enough for you to run through, and then you can just go straight through the middle and up the stairs. If you have a rogue, like we do, you don't have to wait quite as long. You can go a little bit sooner by using the Shroud stealth ability. At the top of the stairs, grab the 2 imps that are running back and forth from side to side. These are the only 2 you need to kill. The ones on the left and the right do not need to be attacked. This next room isn't too complicated for the tank. Just make sure you stack everything up as tightly as you can and don't pull too many mobs. The main thing to watch out for is the scavengers, which spawn books. Make sure you're keeping everything on top of where the books spawn so that they can be cleaved down quickly. There are 3 kinds of books. One of them is a silence, the other one is a stun, and the last one is an arcane book, which channels a short duration cast. If the cast finishes, it will spawn an arcane elemental. The elemental doesn't do anything, but it has a lot of health and it slows the run down if one spawns. This pack of 5 imps can be quite dangerous on fortified difficulty or higher keys. They'll chain cast an ability called Fell Bolt that'll always target whoever has aggro, so usually that will be you. Does a huge amount of magic damage. Make sure that you're using cooldowns if they're going to be getting casts off. Use whatever AoE interrupts and single target stuns that you have to control them. Don't let them cast as much as possible. As the tank for the mini boss, dodge the Fell Gaze that he puts on the ground, which is a green swirling pattern underneath him. And when he casts Blinding Glare, turn to face away from him. This guy can be a tough one. Tank him in the middle of the room to avoid the whirling blade that goes around the outside of the room. Move out of the giant brown pulverizing cudgel each time he uses it. When he casts Scornful Gaze on a party member, make sure you're not between him and the target. The most dangerous part of the bookcase is the books that spawn that cast an instant cast slow on the entire party. The best way to deal with this is to stay a reasonable distance away from where he lands after he hits the bookcase, so that if you do get slowed, you don't end up getting stuck in his pulverizing cudgel ability. The next room looks scary, but it's only the mobs at the very base of the stairs that will actually stick around to fight. They work the same way as the trash you've just been doing. Control the imps' casts and kill all the books before they can hurt you. Pull the 4 spiders at the top of the stairs. Each time these guys melee you, they'll leave a stacking dot on you, which does nature damage. Just make sure that you use damage reduction cooldowns when it hits 5 stacks, and if you have a way to remove it, like if you're a brewmaster or a paladin, make sure you do that periodically to keep the damage intake manageable. You'll want to fight these 3 big spiders together, but be careful because the one at the back, the caster, will be patrolling close enough to the mini-boss to be within aggro range. Just wait for it to be a bit further away before you pull it. The most dangerous ability it has is the Burning Strands ability, which puts a purple swirl on the ground that can be quite hard to see in this area. Does a huge amount of damage if anyone stands in it, but it can be interrupted, so just do that. The 2 melee spiders have a cleave with a cast time called Serrated Cleave, so just make sure you're facing it away from your group. When you pull this mini boss, you don't have to CC the spiders the way I'm doing here. The reason I'm doing this is because it's bolstering. These 3 spiders that spawn with the boss will bolster her when they die, so the best thing to do is to give them a bit of CC so that you can burn down her health before they actually become necessary to kill. If it's not bolstering, you don't need to do this, just pull them with her. This mob doesn't have anything you need to worry about as the tank besides the ongoing poison debuff from the little spiders. Just make sure you aggro them pretty quickly so that your group members don't get the debuff. And throughout your time fighting this boss, keep an eye on your own damage intake and be ready with a cooldown if you need to. On this boss, you'll want to face him towards the walls of the area for his Fell Soul Cleave ability, which you can sidestep out of as soon as the cast begins. You'll want to tank him next to the Fell Portal Guardians when they spawn to make sure your DPS can cleave them down along with the boss. When he casts Chaotic Energy, be ready to run into the middle of the shield along with the rest of your party to avoid being killed. When he summons the second set of portals, make sure you tank the mistresses as quickly as possible to ensure they don't accidentally kill a DPS member or your healer. And this is a really important exception to the rule about getting in the shield for chaotic energy. The mistresses do a knockback, so when you're still tanking them, you need to use damage reduction cooldowns to survive the chaotic energy rather than going into the shield, because if you pull the mistresses into the shield, there's a very real chance they'll knock your group out of the shield, which then kills them. There isn't much more to this guy, just make sure to move out of his cleave to keep your damage intake down, don't get any members of your group cleaved, and avoid the chaotic energy either with cooldowns or with the shield in the middle of the room. Between these two bosses, some Dreadwings will come down and join the room. They have the same Shadow Swipe frontal knockback ability that they did at the beginning of the dungeon. It's not very dangerous, just make sure you don't point it towards any members of your group. These 4 bats should represent the last percentage that you need to complete the dungeon's requirements for enemy kill count. We were a little bit behind in this dungeon, we skipped a couple of mobs that we shouldn't have skipped, so we needed to go back and kill some more after we finished off the last boss, but you shouldn't need to. Grab the shield that's on the ground before this fight starts, you'll need it in the second phase, but in the first phase there's only one ability you need to think about as the tank, and that's Carrion Swarm, which is a frontal cone attack. Face him towards the wall for this. After each cast you want to move him sideways out of the puddle and then turn him back to face the wall again. The second phase starts when he hits 100 energy. You need to head to the middle of the room and activate the shield to protect Illidan from the shadow orbs that come in from the shadow demons around the outside of the room. They can come from multiple different directions, especially if your DPS is a little bit slow in killing the shadows, so you want to make sure you position very carefully so that the 180 degree protection of the shield is enough. Just keep on your toes in this phase, make sure you're constantly spinning your camera looking at where all the shadows are spawning. After you've dealt with about a dozen orbs, the phase will end and the boss will reappear, and you'll be back to phase 1 with just the Carrion Swarm to worry about. If your group's DPS isn't quite up to scratch for the content you're doing, you might find that you'll end up with a second shadow phase. It's no big deal if it happens, just do it the same way you did the first one. That brings us to the end of Cathedral of Eternal Night and my reference guide for it. It's not as hard a dungeon as popular opinion would have you believe. The biggest thing about it is that it's just really unforgiving. If you handle everything correctly, you'll be fine, but if spells don't get interrupted and people don't handle boss abilities in the right way, you'll have a lot of trouble. This video is designed to be a guide for how to tank Cathedral of Eternal Night, and as such I did skip over several mechanics which tanks don't have to deal with. If you want to know more about the dungeon, I would suggest having a careful read of the ability journal for the bosses, and have a quick look at the Wowhead guide for the trash mobs if you want to know some of the damaging abilities that don't actually affect you. Hopefully this guide has given you the confidence to tackle tanking this dungeon on Mythic Keystone difficulty rather than just ignoring your key when it turns into Cathedral. So best of luck out there, and I'll see you all next time.